Hello, everybody. How are we doing today? So today we're going to be starting the next section here, and this chapter is on the endocrine system. So the endocrine system is talking about all the hormones in your body, and just a spoiler alert, there are quite a few. So we're breaking this up into three little videos in this chapter. The first video is just going to be giving an introduction to the endocrine system here. So we're going to compare what an endocrine and an exocrine gland are. So exocrine glands we talked about briefly before for the tissues, and those are secreting things onto the external surfaces via ducts. Endocrine are more internal, so exiting the body, inside the body. We'll break down the details of it then. And then we're going to identify the different endocrine glands that exist in the body and start talking about some of the hormones that are released from those glands. But not all of them. That'll be a separate video. And then we're going to look at the effects of hormones at the target cells. So, in essence, what a hormone does in the endocrine system is that it's released from the gland and can target a cell somewhere else in the body. So, how does it know to target that particular cell? And how is that regulated? So, here I have a table with lots of words comparing endocrine versus exocrine. Mainly, it just breaks it down. So, here we have exocrine, here we have endocrine. Definition wise, it's whether they have ducts or they don't, pretty much, and how they secrete their products. The definition here comes with the rest of the parts of this table. So here, ducts. Exocrine glands have one or more ducts that transport the secretions. Think about your sweat glands, your oil glands, and things like that. All of those are secreting things via ducts. Also, exocrine is either on your skin, so surface of your body, or the lining of like your GI tract, respiratory tract, anything like that. Like your pancreas has some exocrine gland secretion to it. Um, so, and then here, these are endocrine glands are ductless. So they release hormones from cells, typically via exocytosis or just that cell fragmenting. And they travel via your cardiovascular system, so via your blood, and then they travel around your entire body. So here the secretions are enzymes, mucins, ions, water, and so forth. Where here the secretions for the endocrine are hormones. Target site are so just close to the exocrine gland. Here, these target sites are far away from the exocrine gland. So, I mean, from the endocrine gland. There's also autocrine and paracrine. So, auto is where that cell releases something that comes back and affects that particular cell. Paracrine is when this cell releases something that affects its neighboring cell. So it's a message, either a self message for autocrine or a message to the neighbor for paracrine. We see that happening a lot in the digestive system and the immune system. So we're not going to talk about them too much today. And then response, how quick the response is. So you can sweat pretty fast, whereas endocrine glands, it depends on the response time. Think of your sympathetic response when you have a fight or flight response. You get that rush of adrenaline, that norepinephrine going throughout your system. But it takes a little bit of time for all that to activate and then to calm down from it. And so here there can be unicellular or multicellular ones, and they have different modes of secretions, which we didn't talk about too much. And then here, this is just how they, so trabecular, follicular, or disseminated. Don't worry about the types here for that as just part of the table. And then mainly the key is that endocrine is doing homeostasis. Now, exocrine is doing some homeostasis, like for temperature regulation and sweating, because sweat glands are an exocrine gland secretion. But endocrine is mainly looking at blood pressure, that sort of large level homeostasis. So here, like I said, sweat glands, liver, pancreatic, digestive cells, so digestive releasing like proteases and whatnot, salivary glands, mammary glands, and so forth. For exocrine, endocrine glands we'll talk about coming up next, but adrenal gland, pituitary, ovaries, thyroid are all examples of that. So here, what endocrine glands are we going to go over? First up in the brain, you have some neuroendocrine glands, meaning they're related to your nervous system, and it usually takes a neuron to cause the release of them. So first here is the pineal gland located in the epithalamus. Pineal gland releases something called melatonin, which helps regulate your sleep and wake cycle. And then here we have the thalamus and over. So there's the thalamus, and here's the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is connected down here to the pituitary gland via a little stalk. And these two do a lot. The pituitary gland releases like 8 different hormones that we'll talk about later, so quite a bit. Then we have the thyroid. Thyroid is this butterfly-shaped gland right on top of the neck, releasing the thyroid hormone. And then on the back of the thyroid, also calcitonin is another hormone that's released from the thyroid gland. And then we have these pairs here on the back side of the thyroid or posterior side. These are called the parathyroid glands, and they release parathyroid hormone, which helps regulate calcium levels in the blood. Thymus, this is an important gland for T cell maturation. Adrenal gland does quite a bit. So there's the adrenal medulla, which is the middle of the adrenal gland, and that releases norepinephrine and epinephrine. Then you have the adrenal cortex, which has 3 different parts to it, releasing things like aldosterone, help regulating blood pressure, some gonatocorticoids, so some levels of estrogen and testosterone, but most estrogen and testosterone comes either from the ovaries or the testes for the reproductive organs in males and females. And then the outer layer of the adrenal gland releases corticosteroids, and that helps give your glucose levels a boost in the morning. We'll talk about that a little bit more later too. But yeah, so then there's the male and female reproductive systems down here. So uterus, ovaries, and females, testes, and male. All those, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, testosterone, estrogen, human chorionic gonadotropin. That's what you test for. Placenta releases some hormones during pregnancy then. Progesterone in females as well. So a lot of different hormones released from the reproductive system. And then one last one here I forgot to mention was the pancreas. Pancreas releases insulin and glucagon as its hormone. So it has endocrine and exocrine function. Exocrine function being digestive enzymes, endocrine function being insulin, which lowers blood glucose, and glucagon, which raises blood glucose. But we'll talk about those more in future videos. Now, we talk about a hormone being released up here at the pituitary gland. So up here at the pituitary gland, let's say follicle stimulating hormone is released, FSH if is its abbreviation. It has to travel back to the heart, get pumped out of the heart, through the aorta, down the descending aorta, and then eventually get to the branch to get to either the ovaries or the testes, depending on male or female, to then have its response. In females, it helps the stimulation of follicles, development of follicles. In males, it helps spermatogenesis for the formation of sperm. So it has to travel there. How does it know to go to that location? It's not like there are road signs to get there. It's just released throughout all the blood. Well, that target cell has a receptor on it. I jumped ahead here, but that receptor is what interacts with that particular hormone, and that's how that hormone knows where to go. So depending on the class of hormones, so hormones are either derived from amino acids, so they're protein-based, and usually that means they're charged and cannot get through the cell membrane, or they're lipid-based, and that means they can diffuse through the cell membrane. So testosterone, estrogen, those are derived from cholesterol. So those are lipid-based hormones, and they can target virtually every cell in the body. Thyroid hormone can also target every cell in the body, but that's slightly a different reason for that. It's not necessarily lipid-based. But amino acids, they can't freely move through the cell, so they have to bind to a receptor on that cell. Here's the receptor, and then send a signal inside the cell, usually via something known as a G protein, to elicit its response. And that response can vary depending on the cell. It can activate gene expression and make proteins. It can open ion channels and send a message somewhere else. It could just activate enzymes and so forth. So it can do a bunch of different stuff, and it depends on that particular G protein activation. So another thing that affects the target cell response is how many receptors does it have? Say you don't release a ton of hormone, you can upregulate or downregulate the receptors on that target cell to make it more sensitive to that hormone. So you add more receptors, more likely to get a response. If you downregulate the receptors, you can shut down a response. And then you want to look at the amount of hormone released. So if you release a ton of hormone, you're more than likely going to get a response even with a little amount of receptors. And then hormones also interact with other hormones. Follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone each work together in the male and female reproductive systems. So that would be a synergistic effect. Thyroid hormone and growth hormone also work together for growth and development. Permissiveness, now, is where one hormone is given permission to work. So, in order for it to work, it has to have another hormone present. A thyroid hormone and follicle stimulating hormone is another example here. Thyroid hormone says there's enough energy available for follicular development, and then that gives follicle stimulating hormone permission to do an effect. Your fat adipocytes release a hormone called leptin, and when leptin levels are high enough, it promotes the release of estrogen and the onset of puberty in females as well. So that's a permissive permission effect. And then antagonistic effects here, insulin and glucagon are two great examples of hormones that work against each other. So insulin is released when blood glucose levels are high. Glucagon is released when blood glucose levels are low. So coming up in the next video, we're going to talk about homeostasis and how these hormones are fighting or regulating, and we have this seesaw going on in our bodies. So that's what we're going to get into next. But this was just a little introductory to the endocrine system, comparing exocrine and endocrine, going over all the important glands, giving hints of all the hormones we're about to talk about. But yeah, so it's just a little welcome video here, and we're going to get into more details in the next ones. Alrighty, hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.